The sun was sinking, slow and swollen, over the edge of the Wyoming plains. The air shimmered gold, heavy with the smell of dust and faraway rain. Out there, between the barbed fences and the dying cottonwoods, a single rider came on, tall in the saddle, coat flapping like a torn flag of dusk. His name was Cole Braddock, and every mile behind him was a piece of land he owned or lost or wished he could forget. He'd inherited half a county, 300 head of cattle, and a silence that could swallow a man whole. In his pocket lay a folded slip of paper, a debt note, signed by a man too desperate to read the small print. And tonight, that note was all that pulled him forward through the wind. The trail narrowed toward a creek bed gone dry. The house appeared at last, a small wooden thing clinging to the horizon like it was ashamed to be seen. Paint peeled from its ribs. The porch sagged. Smoke rose thin from a crooked chimney. Cole slowed his horse. The animal's breath steamed in the chill. The land around him was so quiet it hurt. He dismounted, boots sinking into dry earth. He didn't expect beauty here. He didn't expect her. The door creaked open before he knocked. A young woman stood there, barefoot on the splintered boards, her dress faded from too many washings. Her eyes were the color of stormlight, gray with something deeper underneath. She looked at him, not like a stranger, but like someone who'd been waiting all her life for bad news. He tipped his hat. "Evenin'. I'm lookin' for Jeremiah Hale." Her voice was soft, but it didn't tremble. "You found his house, sir. But not the man he used to be." Cole's gaze drifted past her, the inside dim, smelling of boiled potatoes and wood smoke. A cough echoed from a back room, dry and broken. "I came about the debt," he said quietly. For a moment, the wind filled the silence. Then she stepped aside. "Then you might as well come in and finish what the sickness started." Inside, everything felt thin, the walls, the air, even the light. A Bible sat open on the table, its pages stained with fingerprints and ash. She moved through the room with a kind of worn grace, gathering cups that didn't match, setting them down like ritual. "Pa's not well enough to stand," she said. "But he'll want to look you in the eye." Cole followed her into a narrow room where Jeremiah Hale lay half in shadow, the sickness already carving him hollow. His face was gray, lips cracked, eyes red from shame more than fever. "Braddock," the old man rasped, "didn't reckon you'd ride all the way out just for a piece of paper." Cole knelt beside the bed, hat in hand. "A debt's a debt, Mr. Hale. But I came to speak plain. Your land won't cover it. Not any more." Jeremiah laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "This land's paid more blood than coin. Maybe that counts for something in your kind of arithmetic." Behind them, the girl stood silent, watching the two men measure each other's ghosts. When the talk was done, Cole left the note on the table. He didn't have the heart to make him sign. The man could barely lift a hand. At the door, the girl stopped him. "You've ridden a long way. You should eat before the road swallows you back." He hesitated, then nodded once. They ate by candlelight, a thin stew that tasted mostly of salt and wind. Every sound, the clink of the spoon, the crack of the fire, carried more weight than words. Cole's eyes kept finding her hands, rough from work, steady even in silence. She didn't bow her head in shame, though poverty sat heavy on her shoulders. After a while, she spoke. "You don't have to be cruel to collect what's owed." He looked up from his bowl. "Sometimes mercy's the cruelest thing," he said. Her mouth softened, but her eyes stayed sharp. "You talk like a man who's buried mercy already." He didn't answer. He didn't know how. Later, he stepped outside. The night had turned to silver. The prairie stretched in every direction, wide as an ocean, quiet as a prayer no one dares speak aloud. She came out after him, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, hair loose and dark. "You'll take the house?" she asked. "The land's worth nothin'," he said. "It's not what I came for." "Then what did you come for?" Her voice trembled only at the edges, more defiance than fear. He looked at her then, really looked. The moon carved her in pale gold, all strength and sorrow. He saw how young she was, and how old she'd been forced to become. Inside the house, her father coughed again, a reminder that time was short, that debts were long. She stepped closer, eyes never leaving his. "If you're taking anything, "Take me instead," she said softly. "I can work, cook, clean, whatever it takes. Don't turn him out to die in the cold." Cole's jaw tightened. "That's not what I came to do. But it's what you'll do if you walk away." The words hit harder than any bullet. For a long time, neither moved. The air between them felt alive, charged with shame, pity, and something older than either could name. Then Cole exhaled, voice low and rough. "Come with me," he said. Just that. 3 words, quiet, weighted, final. Her breath caught. The wind pushed a strand of hair across her face. "Is that mercy," she whispered, "or punishment?" He looked past her toward the broken house, toward the man who'd gambled more than he had to lose. Then back at her, the only thing left standing. "Depends," he said, "on whether you believe in second chances." She didn't answer. She only turned toward the door, backlit by the weak glow of the fire inside. He watched her gather her shawl, press her hand once against the old wooden frame, as though saying goodbye to more than just a house. When she came back out, the night felt changed, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm or a new beginning. Cole helped her onto the horse. She sat straight, eyes forward, not looking back. He mounted behind her, the leather creaking, the reins trembling faintly in his hands. The stars came out one by one, sharp, endless, and old enough to remember every story ever told on this land. They rode out together, leaving behind the smell of boiled roots, a dying man, and a debt that no longer belonged to paper. The wind carried the dust of their departure across the plains, soft, golden, forgiving. By morning, the farmhouse would stand empty, its porch sagging a little more. But in the hush between hoofbeats, something unspoken was born, a promise neither of them yet understood. And far behind them, the sky, vast, merciless and tender, kept its own silent record of every soul who ever owed it anything. Morning broke pale and cold over the Braddock ranch. Mist hung low along the fence lines, turning the pastures into a ghostly sea. The world smelled of frost, saddle oil, and the faint sweetness of alfalfa hay. Nora Hale sat in the back of the wagon, shawl tight around her shoulders, her hands clasped as if in prayer. Every jolt of the wheels carried her farther from what she knew, though what she'd left behind had already stopped being home. Ahead of her rode Cole Braddock, silent as a churchyard at dawn. His coat caught the wind, his hat brim hid his eyes. He hadn't spoken since they left her father's house. Maybe he didn't know what to say. Maybe he didn't need to. When the ranch gates came into view, whitewashed, proud, crowned with the name Braddock and Sons, Nora felt her throat tighten. It was more than land, it was empire. The fences went on forever, and somewhere behind them, 100 eyes would be waiting to see what the rich man had brought home. 1. Arrival among strangers. A cluster of ranch hands gathered near the corral as Cole helped her down. They nodded to him, then stared at her threadbare dress, her pale wrists, the dust still clinging to her hem. Someone muttered, "Another debt come to live out its days." Another laughed. Nora caught every word, though she pretended she didn't. Cole shot them a glance sharp enough to cut wire. The men went quiet. He turned to her. "You'll stay in the East Wing for now. Maggie'll see you settled." A woman in her 50s, round, kind-faced, apron dusted with flour, came forward. "I'm Maggie Dunn," she said, voice soft but firm. "You come with me, dear. There's work here if you're willing." Nora nodded, grateful for the small mercy of gentleness. As she followed the woman inside, Cole lingered by the gate, eyes on the horizon, a man pretending not to feel the ripple he'd set loose in his own world. 2. The shape of quiet days. Days fell into rhythm, slow, wordless, yet full. Nora rose before dawn, fetching water from the pump, baking biscuits that never quite rose. She learned the creak of every door, the weight of every stair. The ranch pulsed with motion, men saddling horses, hooves drumming the earth, the low murmur of cattle like thunder under the skin of morning. She worked in the kitchen, the laundry, sometimes out by the stables. She spoke little. But her silence wasn't meek, it was made of endurance. Cole crossed her path now and then, at breakfast, on the porch at twilight. He'd tip his hat, she'd nod. That was all. Yet each passing left something behind, small and heavy, like a stone laid gently into the riverbed of her heart. At night, when the house went still, she would stand at her window and watch the lanterns burn across the pasture, small constellations built by men who'd learned to find faith in repetition. 3. The weight of gossip. By the third week, the whispers reached town. "Braddock's taken in a debtor's girl," said one voice at the mercantile. "Charity," sneered another. "Or something else entirely," a third one laughed. When Nora went into town for supplies, she felt the stares, the half-smiles, the eyes that followed too long. She carried the shame back to the ranch like dust on her hem, impossible to brush off. That night, she found Cole by the barn, working the reins of a restless stallion. The moon cast him in silver, his movements clean and tired. "You should have left me there," she said quietly. "He didn't turn. And let you starve. I'm starvin' here, too. Just not for food." He stopped then, the leather strap limp in his hand. "You think this is pity?" "I think this is pride," she said. "You couldn't save your father from the drought, so you're saving everyone else from their sins instead." The horse snorted softly, as if to fill the silence. Cole's voice, when it came, was low, almost a confession. "I didn't bring you here to save you, Nora. I brought you here so I'd remember what it means to be human." Something in her chest cracked open at that. Not pain, not quite mercy either. Just recognition. 4. The storm and the coat. Winter came early that year. One evening, a storm rolled in fast, thunder crawling over the hills, sleet rattling against the windows. Nora ran outside to gather the chickens before the cold killed them. By the time Cole found her, she was soaked through, hair plastered to her cheeks, fingers stiff and blue. He grabbed her by the shoulders. "You'll freeze to death out here." "I won't leave them," she said, voice shaking. Something like admiration flashed in his eyes, or maybe fear. He stripped off his long coat and wrapped it around her, the fabric heavy and warm, smelling faintly of leather and cedar smoke. She looked up at him, close enough to see the small scar under his chin, the faint stubble that made him human again. "You'll catch your death," he muttered. "Maybe I already have," she whispered. He said nothing, just stood there with her in the storm, his coat around her shoulders, the world roaring all around and somehow feeling very, very quiet between them. 5. Firelight and a glove. Later, by the fire, she sat mending one of his work gloves, the leather soft, torn where his grip had been too hard on the reins. He watched from across the room, his hands idle for the first time all day. "Why bother?" he asked. "I've got half a dozen more." "You fix what's in front of you," she said, not looking up. "That's all a person can do." When she finished, she held the glove out to him. Their fingers brushed, barely. It was nothing, and it was everything. He took it, eyes lingering on hers. The fire cracked between them, throwing gold and shadow across their faces. "Some debts can't be repaid in coin," he said quietly. She looked up, steady. "Then how do you pay them?" "By stayin'," he said. The air shifted, slow and deep, like the earth breathing beneath their feet. She said nothing, but her gaze didn't waver. And for the first time since he'd buried his father, Cole Braddock felt something inside him move, something that had waited years to thaw. 6. The quiet between them. In the days that followed, they spoke little. Yet their silence grew soft, not empty, but full of the things they didn't know how to say. He'd find her humming as she hung laundry in the sun. She'd find him pausing by the corral, pretending to check the gate when really he was watching her. They lived in the space between words, the gentle ache of something coming alive, the fear of naming it too soon. Sometimes, when dusk fell and the sky turned the color of old whiskey, she'd see him standing by the fence-line, hat in hand, eyes fixed on the horizon, a man haunted not by ghosts, but by grace. And in those moments, though she would never dare admit it, Nora understood the truth of mercy. That it doesn't come as forgiveness or salvation. It comes as a quiet hand extended across the ashes, not to pull you out, but to remind you that you're still here. Spring came like a slow forgiveness. The ice melted in soft sighs, and the fields turned green again, tender shoots pushing up through soil that once held only dust. The Braddock ranch awoke in color, pale lilacs blooming by the porch, the scent of earth thick with promise. But even as the land healed, something unsettled hummed beneath the quiet. Cole Braddock could feel it every time he looked at Nora Hale, the girl who was no longer a debtor's daughter but the pulse of his days. Her laughter, soft and shy, had begun to haunt the hallways. Her voice lingered in the barn long after she'd gone. And yet, between them stood that ledger on his desk, the paper that first bound her to him. It sat unopened now, curling at the corners, but its shadow stretched across every moment. 1. The news that changes the wind. One morning, a rider came tearing down the trail, dust in his wake, hat low, horse lathered white. He dismounted and handed Cole a telegram, breathless. Cole read it twice, jaw tightening. Nora stood by the fence, wiping her hands on her apron, watching his face pale under the brim of his hat. He looked up finally. "It's your father." Her world stilled. The sound of the wind vanished. "What about him?" Cole's voice softened, but mercy always hurts when spoken plain. "He's gone, Nora. Passed in his sleep." She didn't fall. She didn't cry out. She just nodded once, like the earth had tilted, and she was trying to stay upright. "I told him I'd pay what was left," she whispered. "Guess he couldn't wait for me to keep my word." She walked away before he could speak again, across the field, past the barns, until she stood alone by the far fence, the one that met the sky. Cole followed her at a distance but didn't dare approach. Some griefs were private, sacred as prayer. 2. The quiet goodbye. That night, she sat by the fire, still in her work clothes, hands folded in her lap. Cole entered quietly. The firelight carved her face in gold and shadow, her eyes red but dry, her body still. "I'll settle what he owed," she said without looking up. "Sell what I can. You'll get your due." "There's nothing left to pay," he said. "Then I'll find something to owe," she murmured. "It's all I've ever known how to do." He moved closer, the wooden floor sighing under his boots. "You don't owe me, Nora. You never did." Her gaze flickered to his, sharp, tired. "Then what am I to you, Mr. Braddock? A charity? A good deed you can show heaven when you get there?" He flinched. "Don't make me out as better than I am. Then tell me what this is." The room seemed to lean with their words, a breath away from breaking. He looked at her long, then said, "I came for a debt and stayed for a reason I can't name without losing it." 3. The storm of pride. The next morning, she packed her things. A single satchel. The old shawl. A worn Bible. When Cole found her by the wagon, the sky was iron gray, the air sharp with coming rain. "You're leavin'," he said. She didn't stop tying the strap. "You said the debt's cleared. So I reckon it's time. You've got nowhere to go. I had nowhere before. Difference is, now I ain't someone else's burden." "Nora!" She turned to face him then, her eyes fierce, brimming with sorrow and strength. "I won't be another mark in your ledger, Cole. I won't let kindness become a chain." The wind rose between them, lifting the dust in little golden swirls. He stepped closer. "You think I kept you here out of duty?" She smiled, small, bitter, beautiful. "I think you kept me because you didn't know how to be alone anymore." He swallowed hard. "Maybe I didn't." They stood in silence, rain beginning to fall, soft at first, then harder, washing the dust from the porch, the memory of all the things they'd left unsaid. When she started walking toward the gate, he called out, the same words he'd spoken that first night. "Come with me." But this time, his voice broke on the wind. It wasn't a command anymore. It was a plea. 4. The climax, where truth stands tall. She stopped, slowly turned. Rain streaked her face, but her eyes shone clear. "You came for a debt," she said, voice trembling. "And somehow I became it. You can't pay love in ledger lines, Cole." He took a step toward her. "You're right. I came for your father's debt, but I found something that owes me nothing and still gives everything." She shook her head. "You don't have to say. I do." His voice rose, not in anger, but in desperation, as if silence itself were killing him. "I've lived my whole damn life countin' fences, countin' cattle, countin' sins. You made me see what doesn't fit in numbers." He reached into his coat and pulled out the folded paper, the debt note, yellowed and damp from rain. He tore it in half, then in half again, the pieces fluttering away like birds freed from a snare. "There's no debt between us now," he said. "Not ever again." She stared at him, breath unsteady, tears mixing with rain. "Then what am I to you?" He took her hand, rough palm against rough palm, both shaking. "Someone I'd follow through every storm from here to the grave," he whispered. "Not because I owe you. Because I want to." And there, under the darkening sky, among the scent of wet earth and the crack of thunder rolling over the hills, she let him pull her close. The rain fell harder, washing the dust of yesterday from their faces, their clothes, their hearts. For a moment, the world was only that sound, rain and breath and the steady, wordless rhythm of something like forgiveness. 5. The morning after. When dawn came, the storm had passed. The fields shone green as glass, and the ranch smelled of new life. Nora stood by the porch rail, watching the horizon bleed pink. Behind her, Cole came quietly, still barefoot, coffee steaming in his hand. "Didn't think I'd see the sun again," she said softly. "It always comes back," he said. "Even when we don't deserve it." She turned, smiling faintly. "You ever stop reckoning what you deserve, Cole?" He smiled back, the smallest one, but it reached his eyes this time. "Not since you rode beside me." He set his mug down and took her hand, the same way he did in the rain, not to claim, but to promise. 6. Epilogue, the lesson in the dust. Years later, when the neighbors told stories of the Braddock ranch, they didn't speak of debt or pride. They spoke of mercy that built fences and love that mended them. If you ride through that country now, the fields roll easy to the horizon, green as forgiveness itself. And at sunset, when the wind turns gold, you might see two figures walking the fence line, side by side, slow, steady, quiet. Because sometimes the richest man in the valley isn't the one who owns the land. It's the one who finally learns to kneel in it beside another soul. And sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks or music. It arrives with dust and rain, and the sound of a voice saying softly, "Come with me."